Hi, this is Phoenix, and I recently came out with a book called The Philosophy of My Existence, a journal detailing mania. I came out with this book for Kindle, which you can find on my author page at amazon.com/author/phoenix_rises. And the book is actually free for download until June 18th of 2018. I'm going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of my existence, the question being, what is the actual philosophy of my existence? And I would say that that is a very good question. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, and then tie it to the larger issue of what it means for me, Phoenix, to exist, and what the philosophy of my existence actually is. So the philosophy of my existence is indeed written kind of like a journal, in that it was focused on certain experiences of days that I had had, as well as being kind of ordered in terms of ordering my experiences for a certain period of time. And it also has that very intimate feel, as you'll realize with the prose. But I would say that the book is more than a journal in many ways, even though I do describe it as a journal. I would describe it as a philosophical exposition in a way, and I think that that is one of the things that makes the book really interesting, how I merge autobiography with philosophy as I understand it, and philosophy as it is part of the tradition. I will say, though, that the journal piece is just as important as the philosophy, and vice versa. The journal piece is very important because I am talking about my experiences with mania. I am talking about certain experiences that I had with dealing with mania and trying to explicate exactly what my experience was. And I very much enjoyed that process. I remember writing the book a little over 3 years ago and going to Walmart to be able to buy the blue notebook that I used. I was going to handwrite the book, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to write when I bought the notebook, but I had an idea. But regardless, I bought the notebook, and that was a really intense moment for me because I knew that I was going to really express something that was on my soul, in my soul, and something that I felt I desperately needed to communicate. So I bought the notebook, and then that night, I immediately got to writing, and I wasn't feeling well that night, as you can probably tell from reading the book, but I was doing my best to try to make my mania mean something, and so I did the best that I could in that sense. So I'm really proud of this book, and I hope that you will give it a chance. It certainly wasn't easy to write. I would say that one of the things that I was certainly trying to do was create a grand unifying theory of my existence as Phoenix, trying really hard to come up with an analysis of who I was, of what my goals were, of what my essence was, and my being, my ontology. And it was really difficult in that way to try to come up with a theory, but I feel like I was able to do that with the book. As you'll find out, philosophy, just as this happened with my book Visions, Essays on Mental Illness, as well as my book In Defense of the Mind, a treatise on the philosophy of mind, it's the same process of using philosophy to ground me. And I would say that in this book, The Philosophy of My Existence, philosophy was very much grounding me. I would say, to answer your question about what my actual philosophy of my existence is, I would say that's a difficult answer. I would say it's a very difficult answer because you can read my book, but obviously the philosophy has to go outside the text in some senses because it has to be a kind of universal or Platonic form, so to speak. And I would say that I feel like I succeed with figuring that out. Starting to in my book by realizing the way in which I must ground myself with the intellect and ground myself in my experiences with something philosophical or something like philosophy. But I would say that the deeper purpose and perspective is realizing who I am as a person. So realizing that I am Phoenix, who suffers with mental illness. Thankfully, not as bad as it used to be because I was able to get some of the symptoms under control. But realizing that I am going to experience something like mania. I'm going to experience something like psychosis, and that is going to be very painful. But I know that I am Phoenix, and I know that I have mental illness. I also know that I'm gay, for that matter, and I know that I can overcome it. because I know that I'm strong enough to overcome it by using things like philosophy or my thinking, our thoughts. I would say that thinking about the philosophy of my existence in these terms is interesting because I have recently come up with the idea of where I don't actually want to use the words that I often use that deal with something like mental illness because I don't want to stigmatize myself. It was really hard writing the philosophy of my existence because I was afraid it was going to be stigmatized, especially because it has the form of a journal and some of the details are pretty intimate about my thinking. But I really think that it was still nonetheless very abstract with its notions once I started talking about the philosophy, traditional philosophy, and the philosophy of my existence. But I would say, indeed, yes, that it is a very complicated process trying to figure out who I am and where I'm going with my life, but how I feel like I was ultimately able to create a kind of philosophy that I think has a lot of meaning. So if I was going to say what is the philosophy of my existence, I would say, very much like an existentialist, my existence. My existence is my philosophy, and I'm very happy that I was able to write that book, as well as the many books that I am able to write. So again, this is Phoenix, and I hope that you'll check my book out. And that's the philosophy of my existence. Thank you for your time.